This is every Resident Evil game ranked on the spooky level. Alright, so I'm going to be using this template made by Kim Arts, but I adjusted it for my needs. So we have 5 slots. We have survival horror, spooky, action horror, and then Resident Evil 6. Those are like these slots, and we're just going to go through from release all the way, Resident Evil 1 all the way through. I'll skip the spin-offs for now, except maybe Revelations. Maybe I'll talk about Revelations in detail, because I don't have a lot to say about the spin-offs. So I'll just go through in release order from Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil 4, then like do the spin-offs at the end, I don't know yet. But yeah, Resident Evil 1. So Resident Evil 1 as a game doesn't really hold up in the horror factor now. Like, this game is very difficult to take seriously. It's kind of like a game where you had to be there when it came out to like fully appreciate it, right? Which I wasn't, which I do like the game very much, but like it's very goofy and very hard to take seriously. It's not scary even slightly, but like compared to like Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, it's not scary. Honestly, this might be controversial for me to say, but I don't think Resident Evil, like the original, is really worth playing unless you're like a die-hard fan, because Resident Evil 1 Remake just did everything so much better. Resident Evil 1 Remake took what they learned from making Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil Code Veronica, I think was out by then as well, and made probably the greatest survival horror game of all time with Resident Evil 1 Remake. But Resident Evil, the original here is, I'm gonna be looking at it from where it came out, right? When it came out. I should probably said that before, sorry. This is completely unscripted, okay? But like, that's just gonna be, so if there's gonna be a lot of rambling, there's gonna be a lot of bullshit, but like, stay with me, okay? Just focus up. We got this. We'll get through this together.
We will beat this together.
Right, so Resident Evil 1 Remake, when it came out, this was the shit, okay? This game was one of the scariest games ever made at the time. Probably the scariest game ever made at the time. Because a lot of the, like, super scary games hadn't come out yet. Resident Evil was really the starting point for modern survival horror, or, like, horror games in general. Like, this game is what coined the term survival horror and made, like, all the staples, like inventory management, puzzle box, level design, bullshit, indestructible enemies, all of that. All of these staples from the entire series, even, like, the lesser horror ones like Resident Evil 6 still have the DNA of this. And this game, you can feel the original Resident Evil in every game. Like, even Silent Hill 2 Remake just came out, it still feels like Resident Evil 1. Every like horror game from the past like 25 years or 30, how old is Resident Evil? 30 years, Jesus Christ. From the past 30 years, you can feel Resident Evil in it. This game is very important, and at the time it was the shit. It was scary, and I respect this game a lot, even though I wasn't around to play it when it first came out, and I don't have the full appreciation for what it is. I can still look at it and appreciate what it was and what it did for survival horror and how scary it was when it first came out. So I'm gonna put this in the good old horror, because I do think that there are games scarier than Resident Evil 1 in the series now. Even like Resident Evil 1 when it first came out, I do think there's still scarier games currently, or there's scarier Resident Evil games after this point. And Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 is like the perfect video game sequel. This is another game I respect a lot, because they did something that not a lot of game companies or developers or even like any creative thing is willing to do, where they looked at their project, they weren't happy with it and how it was turning out, so they pretty much scrapped 90% of like the ideas and the game, and it just started again, which I respect a crazy amount. Obviously, that's kind of impossible to do nowadays because of how expensive games are, right? But even back then, that was like crazy, just deleting the entire game because they weren't happy with it. I respect that a ton. This game was a massive improvement from the first game. The graphics are insanely good for the time. Like, the FMVs and the graphics look so freaking good. Even nowadays, I played it recently with the GOG PC port, and it still holds up, which is weird to say. Like, at first, you can kind of be like, wow, that's so blocky and crazy, but looking at it, and once you get sucked into the game, it still looks and feels really good. And you can't really say that about a lot of late 90s games, really. Late 90s are where games started getting like really good, with like Final Fantasy VII, Half-Life, Ocarina of Time, all that. But yeah, this game holds up very well. I feel like I'm rambling, but it's fine. And the fear factor, I find this game really scary compared to Resident Evil 1. In this game, everything is like perfectly balanced. Like, the length is really good. 4 hours long for one playthrough, 8 hours long if you do both Leon and Claire. It's a good amount of time, so nothing ever like gets stale and nothing ever really stops getting scary throughout the game. Like, you start off, you're fighting regular zombies, and then you meet the Licker, right? When you're like getting somewhat comfortable, not comfortable, the zombies, you barely fight them, but you're like, oh yeah, I can walk past the zombies, it's fine, this ain't too bad. Right as you are realizing that, you meet the liquor, and the liquor fucks you up. And then right as you get comfortable with the liquors and the zombies together, you meet the dogs. And it's like, the game is constantly ramping up with enemies, and the action elements are a lot bigger in this game, but that's not really a detriment to the horror. Like, this game has more action moments, and it goes further into the storytelling, but that doesn't really put down the horror elements at all. Another thing I like about this game is it lets you feel powerful. It's not scared to like let you kick some ass from time to time. Like, it's definitely a little bit more action focused than the original, but that doesn't really make the game less scary to me. It's kind of a reward, because you get through the scary part, and then you get a gun upgrade, and then you're able to kick ass for a little bit, and then something else is introduced, or like something else stressful happens, and then it gets back into scary. I really like that. In Resident Evil 1, you're pretty much on the back end the whole time, like boss fights, enemies, all that. You're pretty much at a massive disadvantage the whole time, and that's where the horror comes from, while Resident Evil 2's horror comes from making you feel weak, and then making you feel powerful, and then pushing you back to making you feel weak again, and it's like that balance, and I prefer that a lot, and I actually think that's kind of scarier, going in super confident and then like you get obliterated by something, or William Birkin comes out of nowhere and you like get pushed into a boss. That's another thing this game does very well. This is very rambly, I'm sorry, but that's another thing this game does very well. Throws you into encounters when you're not ready for them, right? In Resident Evil 1, you can kind of tell when a boss fight's gonna happen, because it's like a lot of build up, you know. There's usually a door where you only have one key for that one door. There's usually build up, like you see, what's his name? He's like, Jill, there's a big ass snake. It bit me. And Jill's like, oh no, I gotta go kill that snake. But in this game, there's a little less build up to the boss fights. They just kind of appear. Like, you're walking down with the chess pieces, and then this blob of death is just standing there and you have to take him out. Or like, you're going down the train thing with Ada and William Birkin just pops down, and you just have to deal with that. And you might not have enough ammo, and you might not have enough healing, and that's just stressful having to take him out. But yeah, personally, I can see why people would find it less scary because of like the action, but I find Resident Evil 2 a lot more scary than Resident Evil 1. So yeah, I'm gonna put it on the same slot as Resident Evil 1. I'm gonna put it above Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 3. So Resident Evil 3 is the final game of the trilogy, original Raccoon City trilogy, if you will, where Jill Valentine from the first game returns, but instead of it taking place in one center location like Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, it takes place in the entirety of Raccoon City, basically. So you get to explore this massive city, you know, multiple districts, multiple RPG style buildings like the clock tower, the RPD itself, but the city itself is like a RPD you have to unlock. They make up for the massive map by making the zombies double the speed, and they can attack from further, I think, and there's like massive hordes of them. And also there's the whole backdrop of the destroyed city that is also pretty scary. Like, at the start of the game, there's a part where you can like hear a woman scream, and you walk around the corner and there's just zombies eating her alive, and that's like proper freaky stuff. Just watching the city get destroyed by hordes and hordes of the undead is horrifying. And then you get to like the bar. You see Brad from the first game, you know, the guy in the helicopter that abandons you. No, don't go. You know, that guy. He's like, Jill, there's this freaky ass guy coming. You can't beat him. Sorry, bro. And Jill's like, okay, sure. So yeah, he like builds up this whole scary guy, and then you get to the RPD, and this fucking dude, the Nemesis, just murders Brad, kind of like unceremoniously. He's just standing there like, ah! And then Nemesis grabs him and just murders him right there, and it's just this big guy, and you get the option to fight him, and my dumbass, I was like, I've beaten the first two games, I got this shit. My dumbass, I gave you the choice to fight him or just run away. I was like, I can fight him, and he is quick. The Nemesis is like super speed, super smart. He'll actually dodge you. He'll actually like, I didn't mention it before because I forgot to, but in Resident Evil 2 there is Mr. X. You already know that, right? But like, he's not that scary. Mr. X is overhyped in the original version, not the remake, but in the original version he's very overhyped. He just kind of stands there, walks towards you all scarily, and you just walk past him. But Nemesis is that idea cranked up to like 1,000,000. Nemesis is horrifying all the time. Yeah, he's not just stuck to boss fights like another game I know. He is actually pretty much for 70% of the game, basically, he is just in the world looking for you, and there's this music that plays when he's in the area, and like, you never know if he will be there when you walk through a door, and he can walk through doors too. So you'll go into an area, you'll think you're safe from him, and then out of nowhere you'll just hear a door unlock, and he'll just charge you, and it's horrifying. horrifying. And you can also use weapons like rocket launchers and stuff. Nemesis is freaky. He cranks the scariness from like already pretty scary Resident Evil 2 to freaking horrifying with Resident Evil 3. I think Resident Evil 3 is actually scarier than Resident Evil 2. Ooh, Code Veronica. I don't like this game. Is that controversial to say? I know a lot of people like Code Veronica for the story aspect, and I like that too. I like how it continues Chris and Wesker's rivalry from Resident Evil 1 and makes it a little more interesting and builds up to Resident Evil 5. Yeah, it's definitely a game story that has gotten better with time, but I don't like this game really. I love Claire Redfield in it. I love the aesthetic of this. I think this game has a really nice aesthetic. It's pretty colorful. It's pretty nice. Not as pretty as Resident Evil 2, but it has a very nice aesthetic. It was actually the first fully 3D Resident Evil game, so they were able to do a lot with that. But this game isn't that scary, not gonna lie. It's not scary really at all, at least to me. This game is just boring. I don't know. This game actually bores me. It's like, it feels like it wastes your time a lot, and the puzzles aren't creative and they don't make sense like these 3 games. They're kind of just in the way, and there's a lot of useless backtracking and stuff, and I think that kind of degrades the horror a little bit, and also the fact that it's mostly enemies from the first 3 games that return. There's a few new ones, and I think the new ones have some pretty cool designs, but mostly it's just more of the same really, but like worse. So this game, I think I'm just gonna put into spooky. I don't really have much to say about it. I just don't really like this game that much, and I haven't really felt the need to replay it after my first playthrough. But here we go. Resident Evil. This is the shit. This is probably the greatest survival horror game ever. It took the template of Resident Evil 1, the original, and just made it so much better. This game, I don't even know where to start. First off, the acting is good. Well, good enough. The acting is good. This has my personal favorite, Jill Valentine, in it. But yeah, the acting is good in this game, which automatically makes the story better. And it kind of cranks down the goofy aspect a lot. It's still goofy because it is, like, this game came out before even Resident Evil 4 came out, so the goofy aspect is still definitely there, but it's cranked down to add to the horror. And this game's art style, I think this game probably has the best art style in the whole series, now that I think about it. Like, it's dark, but it's also beautiful, and it's like gray, but also colorful. It's kind of hard to explain. You kind of just have to be there. You kind of have to see it. I think it's probably the greatest remake ever made, because it doesn't really remove, I don't think it removes anything. It changes how puzzles work from the original, but it doesn't remove puzzles, or it like changes where puzzles are. But like, it's very, very good. If it's like, it's one of those things where you just like, you have to be there, you have to play it to understand what I'm saying. But Resident Evil 1 is really scary. This game is like shit yourself scary sometimes. Crimson heads are a new concept in this game, where it absolutely trolls old OG players, where if you kill a zombie, the zombie isn't dead completely. So basically, if you kill a zombie, it will lay on the ground like normal, and it will bleed like normal. So like, if you played the other 4 games, you'll be like, yeah, okay, the zombie's dead, moving on. But if you leave the zombie without getting rid of it properly by putting fuel on it and burning the body, it will come back as like a super zombie that does a ton of damage, and it just screams at you and charges you down. And those guys are the scariest, because like, obviously limited inventory, so you can't hold the fuel in that all the time, so you kind of gotta waste time to either ignore the zombie. It kind of just makes killing zombies less useful in the best possible way, because one, you have limited ammo and zombies take a lot of health, but then it is, if you fully take down the zombie, there's a risk of it becoming a crimson head, and you won't be able to come back in time with the fuel and the lighter, or you forget about them and just get jump scared by them out of nowhere. But they are really, really, really strong, and they will fuck you up, but they're also kind of a glass cannon, so if you can like get a good shotgun shot on them or something, they will go down pretty easily. But like, most of the time you're not ready for them, because it's kind of like a ticking clock, and you kind of lose track of them, and maybe you forget about them. So Resident Evil 1 Remake, I'm gonna put on the first survival horror scary category. This game is freaky. Another game I don't like, Resident Evil 0. Okay, I really don't like this game. I like this game less than Resident Evil Code Veronica. This might actually be my least favorite Resident Evil game, not gonna lie. But Resident Evil 0, this is another game that the scary factor is kinda limited by how shit the gameplay is. I don't like the gameplay in this game. It's just really annoying. Like, there's no item box. The buttons are weird. It came out the same year as Resident Evil 1, and it's meant to be like a sequel to Resident Evil 1, or a prequel sequel, a direct like prequel that leads into Resident Evil 1. There's like a gimmick where there's 2 playable characters, but that just leads to being more annoying. Like, the other player character is kind of stupid. Like, you do get some options to make sure they don't waste ammo and stuff, but like, I think the NPC character, when you're not controlling them, is kind of worse than Sheva. Don't come at me. But Sheva gets so much shit, but Sheva ain't that bad. Not gonna lie, Sheva ain't that bad compared to Billy or Rebecca Rebecca, depending on... You swap between the characters throughout the game. You don't have to, like, pick one character and that's who you play as. You can swap between them with a button press, and that's, like, adds to puzzles. I really like that part where you can swap characters to go into different rooms, but most of the time, it's just more annoying than anything, and that kind of brings down the fear factor. The start of the game, where you're playing as Rebecca alone in the train, is really good. I like that, but once Billy is introduced, I think the game just plummets in quality and just gets irritating, and it's not scary beyond that point. And yeah, I'll put it in spooky. It's definitely scarier than Code Veronica, but it's still not nearly on the level of these ones. Resident Evil 4. So Resident Evil 4 is weird because it's another game where if you talk about it now, anyone would tell you that this shit ain't scary. It's a full-blown action game, right? But if you talk to anyone who played it at the time, they'll say something completely different, being like, when Resident Evil 4 came out, it was terrifying because, like, it was designed in a way... I don't know, I've only heard this from, like, word of mouth from older people I talked to who played the game when it first came out, or, like, YouTube videos I've seen of how... But, like, this game... This game's really weird because I want to rate it on how it first came out, when it first came out, right? But it's kind of hard to talk about it in that way because Resident Evil 4 is my favorite game of all time, by the way, in case you didn't know. And I've played this so many times, but I only played it for the first time like 3 years ago, right? So I don't really have the past knowledge to like kind of say, like, it's easier with these games because you can kind of tell what they were like when they first came out. You can appreciate them for how they were when they first came out. But this game's kind of weird because a lot of people who played it when it first came out be like, this was the scariest shit ever, right? But when you play it now, it's kind of a full-blown action game, so it's kind of difficult for me to rank this. So, but Resident Evil 4 is definitely unique. It's double the length of any other Resident Evil game from this point, and it completely changed the gameplay. So now, instead of it being fixed camera and slow, it's an over-the-shoulder shooter. It's kind of the granddaddy of third-person shooters in a way. But yeah, they completely changed it to be more, definitely more action-based, but still have the survival horror charm. I don't know, this game is so hard to talk about. I don't know why this game is so hard to talk about all of a sudden. This is my favorite game of all time. How do you talk about this game as a survival horror game? So this game isn't survival horror. It's definitely action horror, but it's scarier than every other action horror game ever made. Like, quite a bit scarier, in my opinion. Yeah, Resident Evil 4 kind of got rid of the dread aspect of the old games. The old games are more about, will I have enough ammo to deal with this hallway? Will I get bit? Will I have enough healing? What is behind the next door? Alright, that's kind of how I describe the fear factor of the original games. But Resident Evil 4 is more about, am I good enough to get past this part? Am I strong enough to get past this part? And that's where the stress comes from. Like, how the game starts is you get introduced to the combat with very few enemies, right? But once you get into the village, that's where the game just goes crazy and it doesn't hold back, and there's like dozens and dozens of guys coming at you, and it's really stressful because you have no resources and you gotta like try and survive this horde of enemies that are smarter than zombies. They actually kind of plan. Like, there's a part at the start where, okay, so you're going through, you're fighting guys, and you take shelter in a house, and then a fucking guy with a chainsaw shows up when you think it couldn't get any worse, and then they surround the entire building, bashing on, like, the windows, the chainsaw guy is breaking through the door, and it's just, like, very overwhelming, and that's kind of how it is. It's like, am I strong enough to get through this? Am I skilled enough? Instead of being like, will I have enough items to get through this, right? That's kind of still there, the ammo thing, but, like, ammo is definitely way less of a problem in Resident Evil 4. If you know what you're doing, you have a ton of ammo throughout most of the game. And then you have to look after Ashley, which isn't very scary in my opinion. It's more annoying. When it came out, I'd say it's up here, but I don't know. I would put it on spooky. Oh yeah, and the Regenerators. I completely forgot. Okay, this game does a genius thing where everyone will always talk about the third act of the game and how it's not scary, but the island has some of the scariest moments. Like, if you talk about the scariest moments in Resident Evil 4, people will bring up the Regenerators, but that's on like the part that people say isn't scary. So they do a genius thing where when the basic enemies aren't scary at all anymore towards the end of the game, they have two of the scariest sections. So first it starts with the Regenerator, where you go into a room, pick up a card, and there's like this creepy breathing guy that's like It's my regenerator impression. What do you think? And they are basically indestructible seemingly at first, right? So they are terrifying. They can grab you. They are overwhelming as fuck. Obviously the scariness of the regenerators has kind of faded in time as people have learned how to take them out and people have gotten better at the game and stuff like that. But when, like, first experience, like, think about it, look in your mind, think about the first time you played Resident Evil 4, imagine you're going through, you're like, okay, I'm getting close to the end of the game, it feels like this is great, okay, I'm feeling pretty confident, and then out of nowhere, they pull out these scary sumbitches, alright, just remember your feeling, that was horrifying, right, and imagine, like, back when the game first came out on, like, the CRT TVs, you can't see anything, it was perfect, it had that weird aspect ratio that the original version of Resident Evil 4 had, where it was still widescreen, even though most people didn't have widescreen TVs back then. So yeah, it was like black bars on the top and bottom, so you pretty much couldn't see shit. That's another reason why it used to be scarier than it is now. You couldn't see anything. Oh yeah, just think about that, and then think about the U3 or the It fight, where you're just trapped in a maze with this fucking guy that is super fast. That part in VR was awesome. I played Resident Evil 4 on the Quest 2 a few months ago, or a year ago at this point, and that part was really fun because you can actually like see the spit dripping from its mouth, and you look up and it'll be staring at you. That was terrifying. If you haven't played Resident Evil 4 VR, you should. I haven't played the remake VR because PlayStation 5 VR is too expensive, and I don't even have a PS5. But I would say the horror has definitely faded with time. I feel like this was the biggest ramble part of the entire thing. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to collect my thoughts and I'm just speaking. So sorry if this video ends up being like incoherent, but like I came up with this idea and this is a great idea. Okay. Alright, I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm going to split this video in 2 parts. I didn't want to do this originally, but the video is just going way too long and I've completely run out of editing time basically. So the next part will be out next week at the same time that this video uploaded. So look out for that, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it was a little bit rambly, but the second part is definitely more focused and coherent. Okay, I promise you that as I got in my mind, but I don't want to make this outro too long. Like and subscribe if you liked it. I don't know what else to say. You know, give me a good old like. You'll put it in the algorithm. That'll be pretty nice, and I'll see you all in a minute.